Good evening, everybody. I've noticed on these that it takes a minute, for whatever reason, once I finish, for the upload. When it uploads to YouTube, it seems to miss a minute or two for the first 5 minutes, and then it straightens itself out. I can't quite figure this out. But I really like this program, and I'm going to continue to use it on a prototype alpha test mode. So, this is a couple hours old at this point. It's from USA Today. I thought this was a very interesting piece, so I wanted to share it. Trump. If I'd known Sessions would recuse himself on Russia, I wouldn't have picked him. By William Cummings. Updated 1 minute ago. It's released a couple hours ago from what it said on my PC. President Trump said he would never have picked Jeff Sessions as his Attorney General if he had known Jeff Sessions would recuse himself from involvement in the investigation into Russian election meddling, an interview with the New York Times said Wednesday. According to the Times, Trump complained about how Sessions' recusal led to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's appointment of Robert Mueller as a special counselor. Sessions should have never recused himself, and if he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me before he took the job, and I would have picked somebody else, Trump said, according to the Times. Sessions was one of the earliest and most prominent political figures to endorse Trump's presidential run, but news media reports dating back to March have said the president has been angry with his attorney general since Sessions' decision to recuse himself. Quote, Jeff Sessions takes the job, gets the job, recuses himself, which frankly I think is very unfair to the president, Trump told the Times. How do you take a job and then recuse yourself? If he would have recused himself before the job, I would have said, thanks, Jeff, but I'm not going to take you. It's extremely unfair, and that's a mild word to the president. Trump also accused former FBI Director James Comey of, quote, trying to leverage a dossier of compromising material to keep his job, and said Mueller's office is plagued with conflicts of interest, the Times reported. Trump also said in the interview that Mueller would, quote, cross a red line if he looked into his family business's ties that aren't related to Russia. The president addressed recent reports that he shared an hour-long and previously undisclosed conversation with the Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Group of 20 meeting in Germany earlier this month. Trump said the two leaders spoke for 15 minutes exchanging pleasantries and discussing Putin's ban on American adoption of Russian children, which he enacted in response to the U.S. sanctions on Russia. As for the meeting that his son Donald Trump Jr. had with Russians tied to the Kremlin in an effort to obtain incriminating information about Hillary Clinton, Trump told the Times he didn't need any dirt on Clinton during his campaign because he already had more than enough. And there's some pictures on there. Now, what's interesting about this is it's the first time that I have seen or heard. So this is with the New York Times. So President Trump said he would have never picked Jeff Sessions as his Attorney General if he had known Sessions would recuse himself from involvement in the investigation into Russian election meddling in an interview with the New York Times Wednesday. So apparently Trump did an interview with the New York Times. That's interesting. Citing recusal, Trump says he wouldn't have hired Sessions. Wow. So this is probably the real story. So actually this may be real news from the New York Times? I'm shocked. But apparently that is so. So I might as well just go through and read this too while I'm at it. So, again, citing recusal, Trump says he wouldn't have hired Sessions. By Peter Baker, Michael S. Schmidt. So, I guess I'm apologizing for having to read the New York Times, but apparently they did release a real news story, so that's pretty shocking. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep my news reads with minimal comment, but it's hard when you're reading a failing pile of garbage. Okay, so Washington. President Trump said on Wednesday that he never would have appointed General Jeff Sessions had he known Mr. Sessions would recuse himself for overseeing the Russian investigation that has dogged his presidency, calling the decision very unfair to the president. Read excerpts of the Times interview with President Trump. So, I got a kind of comment here. Oh, I got a chat here. Let's see. Angel, what are you using? This program, Mad Dodge is back. Cool. You keep going live. Do you just want to do a proper stream? No, I'm just kind of testing my stuff. The program that I'm using right now is called Mobizen Live. I'm using it on a phone. Mobizen, I believe is how you spell it. Mobizen Live. So I'm gonna keep going here. Watch the chat. In a remarkable public break with one of his earliest political supporters, Mr. Trump complained that Jeff Sessions' decision ultimately led to the appointment of a special counsel that should not have happened. Sessions should never have recused himself, and if he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me before he took the job, and I would have picked somebody else, said Mr. Trump said. In a wide-ranging interview with the New York Times, the president also accused James B. Comey, the FBI director he fired in May, of trying to leverage a dossier of compromising material to keep his job. Mr. Trump criticized both the acting FBI director, who has been filling in since Mr. Comey's dismissal, and the deputy attorney general who recommended it. Sorry, guys, I am getting a little tired. Probably going to hit the hay after this. My reading skills are not up to par. My coffee's worn out. And he took on Robert Mueller III, the special counselor now leading the investigation into Russian meddling in last year's election. Mr. Trump said Mr. Mueller was running an office rife with conflicts of interest and warned investigators against delving into matters too far afield from Russia. Mr. Trump never said he would order the Justice Department to fire Mr. Mueller, nor would he outline circumstances under which he might do so. But he left open the possibility as he expressed deep grievance over an investigation that has taken a political toll in the 6 months since he took office. Asked if Mr. Mueller's investigation would cross a red line if it had expanded to look at his family's finances beyond any relationship to Russia, Mr. Trump said, "I would, yes." He would not say what he would do about it. Quote, "I think that's a violation. Look, this is about Russia." While the interview touched on an array of issues including healthcare, foreign affairs, and politics, the investigation dominated the conversation. He said that as far as he knew, he was not under investigation himself, despite the reports that Mr. Mueller is looking at whether the president obstructed justice by firing Mr. Comey. "I don't think we're under investigation," he said. "I'm not under investigation. For what? I didn't do anything wrong." Describing a newly disclosed informal conversation he had with President Vladimir Putin of Russia during a dinner of world leaders in Germany this month, Mr. Trump said that they talked for about 15 minutes, mostly about pleasantries, but Mr. Trump did say that they talked about adoption. Mr. Putin banned the adoption of Russian children in 2012 after the United States enacted sanctions on Russia, accused of human rights abuses, and an issue that remains a sore point in relations with Moscow. Mr. Trump acknowledged that this is interesting that adoptions came up since his son Donald Trump Jr. Mr. Trump acknowledged that it was interesting that adoptions came up since his son Donald Trump Jr. said that was the topic of the meeting he had with the Russians with the ties to the Kremlin during last year's campaign. Even though emails show that the session had been set up to pass along I would use quotes, incriminating information about Hillary Clinton that was never revealed at all to be what anything was. But the president said that he did not need such material from Russia about Mrs. Clinton last year because he already had more than enough. The interview came as the White House was trying to regain momentum after the collapse of health care legislation, even while the president's son-in-law, and former campaign chair were being asked to talk with Senate investigators. Relaxed and engaged, the president sat at the resolute desk in the Oval Office with only one aide, Hope Hicks, sitting in on the interview. The session was sandwiched between a White House lunch with Republican senators and an event promoting Made in America Week. Over the course of 50 minutes, the often fiery Mr. Trump demonstrated his more amiable side, joking about holding hands with the President of France and musing about having a military parade down the main avenue in Washington. He took satisfaction that unemployment has fallen and the stock market has risen to record highs on his watch. Well, this is a long article. Just because of wow, this just goes on and on. So there's an actual real, I'm going to halt right here just because I'm tired and I've been doing this for a while. And when you get reading for a while, it gets long. But apparently the New York Times was granted an interview with Mr. Trump, President Trump, and President Trump granted them an interview, apparently, which again shows his side. Even though he's been, very critical of news and calling people fake news, he's still maybe trying to reach out to him a little bit. So the people that, I'm in the camp that I love when he calls out fake news. I love it. I hate the fake news. But this is a real moment for the New York Times. This is something that can allow them to save a little bit of face. And the people that are annoyed by the president calling out fake news, well, maybe they can start to make, maybe this is something that can appease them a little bit. Because this is a very long and in-depth, well-written article about the interview that took place. Without really getting into it and reading it maybe a couple times, getting all the ins and outs at this late at night, I'm not going to be able to dissect it as well. But I do want to comment, I guess, on the fact that Sessions is not turning out to be a good pick. Ron Paul bashed on him yesterday, and then for good reason. And I did on the stream that I did with Ogre yesterday, and Mad Dodge and the Britisher. I didn't bash on him because I think he is a good man at heart, but definitely the civil liberties violations and the civil asset forfeiture. You can tell it's getting late. Civil asset forfeiture is it's an issue, big issue, real bad issue. So, I don't know what they can do about that at this point. And I totally disagree with Sessions recusing himself. That is now looking odd. It's now odd. Okay, all of this is odd now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, so you got the President Trump buttering up with the New York Times to do an interview, throwing his Attorney General under the bus. That is basically what it is. I've never seen that happen before. They usually stick by your guy no matter what, or your gal no matter what, right? So that is a little bit odd. What kind of 3D chess is this? Can he get rid of him? Can he just fire him and somebody that doesn't have to be recused? I don't know. I don't know how this works. But I'm not really becoming a big fan of Jeff Sessions. I like when Jeff Sessions talks. He talks a good game. But this stuff about the war on drugs and stuff, that's not good stuff. And the fact that he recused himself, he shouldn't have done that. He didn't do anything. Jeff Sessions never did anything wrong to have to recuse himself. He basically buckled under the pressure of fake news, in my opinion. And that's just my vantage point. You know, I'm always one to say that reality is malleable, and maybe I don't always have the right answer, but that's just what it seems like from my perspective. So go ahead and read this article. After I end this live stream, I will try to attach. I got to remember to do that all the time because this program doesn't allow me to do that in midstream, but I will attempt to attach both news articles. This is the main one. It looks like the one I read from USA Today was just a regurgitation of less information, a more tight version, not as thorough. So, but I will post links in the show notes for both of these. So, all right, I'm gonna call it a night. I've done enough experimenting and streaming tonight. So, everybody have a wonderful night. Thanks for tuning in, and Black Tooth.